and then here it'll catch up. So there's our live
Go ahead and go in front of the screen.
our live feed, so you should be able to see. And if I stand here, and it'll take a second to catch up. But if I stand here or stand here, should be able to be good. I mean, it's,
15 seconds right now.
so
Are we live?
We are live.
We did go ahead and start it up. Give them the chance to log in and do their thing.
Morning, everybody. So are those your masks or are those his?
He's gonna do the.
Okay, I was
he's
going to
gonna
say,
do
because
the
I'm going to
demonstration.
holler if you think you're, yeah.
No. He's gonna do the demonstration. I'm gonna do the lecture. So you should see these numbers start popping up when everybody starts logging in. So obviously we have 5 minutes until class officially starts. So we'll just give them the time to do that.
And it's the same link, right? It's the same link to this. I mean,
Correct.
to the
It's just my YouTube channel.
Okay.
And then that will pop up on YouTube.
Ooh, we have one person. Woo. Nice.
So let's do Oh.
Okay, so Mr. Ewald, I am not seeing a live.
On my
Uh-uh. Is it working?
It should be. It's online. If you go to my YouTube channel,
It's not online.
so just search or use the link or whatever.
Yeah.
So refresh.
Mr. Wynn, can you pull it up on your computer?
His computer has the. So we got 5. So we got one from your class that just logged on. I don't know why you can't see it.
My computer, what can I say? It has its own mind. Um, I probably should put it here, all right? I just don't need anything. It's all good. Let me log out.
Yeah, see if you can do that because we are getting some to log in. We got 6 so far. 2.
By the way, hold on.
I'm on. So, do I count as one of the
I
concurrent?
think you do.
Now I can see it.
It's up there now.
It's up there now.
Okay.
There should be 3 or 4.
All right. Hey, so really quickly, good morning, guys. As you log on, I know that there's not a ton of people that are on right now, but I just wanted to jump on for those that are. We're going to start here in 5 minutes or so, so kind of sit tight, wait for the live lecture to start. If you're already on, be a good idea to get out a piece of paper, get out something that you can write with, because you are going to kind of take notes and answer some questions as we go through the live lecture today. So try to have the lecture on your computer screen and then pull up something to write with kind of there on the side. And then we'll come back together in 5 minutes and get it going. All right, let's go.
Mine popped up the first time. Yeah, when I pulled mine up, it's the very first. Weird. Another minute or so, and then I have 31 students in this class, so it should be a big turnout. Why does it say 30? He maybe using his dad's. How many do you have in this period? About 60. So 59 to be exact. What's that? 59 to be exact. 59. Yeah. It is not. We're only halfway there. I think we wait 3 more.
All right, guys. We'll take just maybe 2 or 3 more minutes. We're trying to get as many of the students logged on and into the live lecture as we can. So we'll give it 2 or 3 more minutes. For those of you that are here, I'll kind of repeat what I said a little while earlier. We're asking that you do take notes while we're doing this. So if you can have out a sheet of paper and something to write with while the live lecture is going on, you can jot down those notes on your own paper. We're going to have some questions that we're going to be talking about, as well as the information about what is science and the scientific method. So probably 2 minutes now. Let's wait. We'll get a few more people in there and we'll roll from there. everybody. Welcome to my class, Mr. Ewald's 4th period class. Welcome to Mr. Wen's 4th period class, and welcome to Mrs. Becker's 4th period class. I'm going to be the one up here for the most part in front of the camera today talking about our material for today, but I wanted to let you know that Mr. Wen and Mrs. Becker are both in the building, so they're going to be helping us out as we go through this. Answering some questions. We're going to do a little demonstration here in a little while. So they're going to be a part of it too. For those of you that just logged on, make sure that you have something to write on, piece of paper, notebook, binder, whatever it is, and a pen or pencil, because we're going to ask that you take some notes while we talk about this stuff and answer some questions on your notes. And then try your best to participate in the live chat. So over there on the side, you should see that live chat where people are checking in, putting their name and their teacher's name. Make sure that you hop into that live chat when we ask you to answer a question or to offer up some insight about what we're talking about. That just makes this go a lot better, helps us out because we're stuck in the building here and you guys are who knows where behind your computers. So today we're going to talk about basically what is science? What is the scientific method? So that's what we're going to start off with today. So what is science? Okay, science, based on what it says here, is a method for studying the natural world. It's a process that uses observations that we make and investigations that we can run to gain knowledge and answer questions about the natural world, events that occur in nature. So thinking about something that just recently happened along the Gulf Coast of the United States, we had Hurricane Marco and Hurricane Laura, I think it was, that came up through Louisiana and Texas. So in the past, and I mean think back hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years, people in the world used information that they had to try to determine why things like hurricanes and tornadoes and weather events, why those were happening. Way back when, they fell on, it was potentially a god, right? Poseidon or somebody like that was bringing down the wrath of nature on people because of something bad that they had done, okay? And they believed that for a while until people started using science to ask questions, carry out investigations, and answer those questions. So over the next thousands and hundreds of years, people started using science to answer those questions and carry out investigations to answer all different kinds of questions about the natural world. So that's what we're going to really talk about today. So we're going to look at the scientific method. When you think about science, when you do science, when you ask questions, not just in your science class, but also in your day-to-day life, we use the scientific method to answer those questions, to carry out investigations. So the scientific method is just a series of steps, right? An organized set of investigation procedures that we call the scientific method, right? There are 6 common steps that we use in the scientific method, and we're going to be talking about each of those today in a little bit more detail. I know it might be a little bit hard to see this image here, but this shows those steps of the scientific method. We are going to give you access to this later on, so you will be able to see this image. But I'm going to jump to the next slide because I want to give you guys the opportunity to see an easy way to remember the 6 steps of the scientific method. So here we go. So what you can see here on the overhead are the 6 steps of the scientific method. So here's what we have. Here's what we're going to be talking about today. Step 1, ask a question. So the very first thing we do in the scientific method is we ask a question. Step 2, we research or we gather information about the question or the topic that we want to investigate. Step 3, we're going to create a hypothesis based on steps 1 and 2. Step 4, we're going to develop an experiment and run that experiment to test our hypothesis. Step 5, we're going to analyze data. So we're going to take all of the stuff that we find in that experiment and we're going to analyze it. And then step 6, we're going to draw conclusions. So we're going to look back at everything that we've done in the previous steps and we're going to try to draw a conclusion based on everything else that we did. Also down here A very important thing that we sometimes add to this last part is communicating our results, sharing our results with other scientists, other students, your teachers. So a big part of the scientific method is sharing what you find, letting people know, hey, I found this. Here's some information for you, or maybe other people can redo that experiment to see what they get. Okay? So these are the 6 steps. What I want you to focus on right here is this red part. And I know on your screen it might be a little bit hard to see, but we take the first letter of each of these 6 steps, and that creates ARHEAD. A-R-H-E-A-D. ARHEAD. If you can remember ARHEAD, chances are you can remember the 6 major steps of the scientific method. Right? So take a sec. I'll give you 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Make sure that you jot this down on your paper. ARHEAD. Ask a question, research and gather information, create a hypothesis, experiment, analyze data, and draw your conclusions. So I'll give you 15 seconds or so to do that, and then we'll hop back into it. Make sure if you have any questions that pop up while we're doing the live lecture, you can put those in the live chat. If you don't want to do that, you could always send a message to me, Mrs. Becker or Mr. Wen via Schoology or via Teams, and we'll definitely help you out with those once we're done with the live lecture. So just a couple more seconds to do that, and we'll jump back into it. So let's move on. We're gonna dive into the scientific method. So here we have on our slide the first step of the scientific method. So stating a problem, asking a question. Before we can do anything else in science or with the scientific method, we have to state a problem or ask a question. Okay. So on the slide here we have a picture of a virus. And over here we have this wonderful character, this anime character that has a mask over his nose and mouth. So I'm gonna ask Mr. Wen or Mrs. Becker, is there something that has been going on for the past couple of months that we could potentially ask a question about in the world?
A virus, maybe?
Yeah, right. So there is this little virus that's been making its way around the world over the last couple of months. So that's still going on right now?
I think so.
I think so.
Okay.
I think that's why 2 of us are sitting here with masks on.
Absolutely. You may notice that I am not wearing a mask at the moment. We're keeping our 6 feet of social distancing. If I move around the room, I put my mask back on. But while I'm standing up here, I don't have to wear it because I'm far enough away from everybody else in the room. So we have this character here that is wearing the mask, like I said, properly over his nose and mouth. So we can ask a question, all right, about masks and the coronavirus. Okay. So the first question that I want you to write down in your notes is, what is the question that we have or that we can make about masks and the coronavirus? So if you were going to start the scientific method thinking about the coronavirus and thinking about masks, what would be a question that you could ask about masks and the coronavirus? Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute, maybe 2 minutes to jot that down on your end. What I would also like is if your last name starts with A through F, okay, A through F, last name, go ahead in the live chat, put a question that you could potentially ask about masks and the coronavirus, and then I'll have Mr. Wen read those off to me, and we'll see where everybody is. Okay, so at this point, probably a minute and a half, jot that stuff down, put those questions in the live chat, and then we'll come back together and we'll move on from there.
So we got some responses. So how beneficial are masks when combating coronavirus? How do masks help decrease virus cases? What percent of people who wear masks on a daily basis get coronavirus?
Ooh,
That's a good one.
That's a
I haven't seen
fantastic
that, I've not
question.
seen that one yet.
yes. See if we can get maybe one or two more, and then we'll jump back into our discussion.
And we're not getting very many A through S responding right now. We only had 1, 2, 3, 4 kids responding. So come on, kiddos.
We know there's some A through F last names out there, so let's hop on that live chat and let us know what you guys think about questions.
How effective are masks from decreasing the virus spread?
Ooh, all right. Okay, so thank you to those of you that hopped on that live chat. Make sure you do that. If we ask you to put a question or an answer or something on there, help us out. That gives us the feeling that we're actually in a group or in a lecture. So make sure that you hop on there and do that. But great job on those questions so far. So let's roll on.
We got one more question.
Okay.
How much more likely is a person able to spread the plague if they are wearing a mask improperly?
Well,
Ooh.
that's a good one too.
So that's a good thing. Let's jump back really quickly. Obviously, I'm not wearing my mask again because of social distancing, but that's a good little. When we do come back to school, we want to make sure, just like this image, we want to make sure that we are properly wearing our masks, right? Make sure it's covering our nose, covering our mouth. Make sure that it fits properly, so that we know we're doing the best possible job that we can to try to stop the spread of the coronavirus. So that's an incredible question. So let's kind of jump ahead. Okay. So we looked at step 1, which is asking a question or stating a problem. Step 2 of RHEAD, of the steps of the scientific method, is gathering information by doing research, by taking observation. So we want to gather as much information as we can so that we can start the process of using the scientific method to answer our question. Okay? So when we think about it, we're students, we're teachers, we're people that go around in this world. So when we get to this part of the scientific method, we want to ask another question. Okay? So we want to ask question number 2. What are some resources that we could use to look up information on the coronavirus, on masks, some of those questions that you guys asked in the live chat? So Mr. Wen's going to add that to the live chat. I would say, what did we do, A through F? So let's do G through L. That doesn't give us a lot, but let's do G through L. If your last name starts with G through L, let's throw out some resources, some places that we could go to find information about masks and the coronavirus. Again, I'll give you a minute or two, jot that stuff down, put your answers in the live chat, and we'll come back together here in a minute or two.
So I should have at least 6 kids, G through L.
Okay.
So come on, kiddos.
Hey,
G
Mrs.
through L.
Becker has 6 kids that are last names G through L, so we know you're out there. So let's get those questions thrown into that live chat. And I guess while we're waiting, while Mr. Wen is waiting on some of those questions, Mr. Wen, can you think of a place or a resource that we could use to find information about masks or the coronavirus?
Well, I know that one of the students just came up with the idea of CDC.
Hey.
I think that's a great website, very, very reliable. We can find out a lot of information about the coronavirus.
Absolutely. So the CDC's website would be a fantastic place to go and find information.
Oh, another one is a primary source, a doctor. That's
Ooh.
a great response.
Okay. So going to a doctor and asking them questions about what they know, what they've learned about masks and the coronavirus. I love it.
There were also articles from the Daily News, Google.
I like it.
So there are definitely some resources out there that are really good to give us an idea of where to get some information.
Okay. wonderful. So the idea with that is that there are a number of places that we can go to find information about, in this case, masks and the coronavirus. One of them just popped up into my head, though, so I want to pose this to the teachers that are in the room. I've heard about this thing called Wikipedia.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You guys have heard of Wikipedia?
Oh, yeah.
All right. What would be your take on whether or not Wikipedia would be a good resource for finding information about this question or any question that we might have this year?
It's a good place to start, but it's certainly not my preference. So, I like the kids to go out and use like Johns Hopkins, but it's a very good place to start to find other resources around.
I like it. Great answer from Mrs. Becker. Wikipedia is a great place to start, but then we want to back that up with resources that come from other places. Okay, so stating a problem, asking a question, and gathering information are the first two steps. We're going to go on to the third step here. So the third step of our scientific method is forming a hypothesis. So a hypothesis is basically a formal statement that provides a possible explanation for a problem using what we know and what we observe. So every single time that we do a scientific investigation or an experiment, we need to create a hypothesis. Once we've stated our problem or asked our question, and then we've gone to gathering our information, the very next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a hypothesis. So here on the board, you can see a picture of Bill Nye. Hopefully everybody knows who Bill Nye is. And he has a mask on his face, and he's standing here right next to a candle. So I'm going to ask Mr. Wen, who's sitting right over here, more than 6 feet away from me. Mr. Wen, could you create a hypothesis or shine a little bit of light onto what you think Bill Nye is doing in this picture?
I think Bill Nye is trying to blow the candle out while wearing a mask.
Okay. So he has the mask on. He's standing here by the candle. So potentially Bill Nye is going to try to blow that candle out while wearing a mask. Okay? So, we could ask the question, and we are asking the question to you guys, what is a possible hypothesis for testing the efficacy of masks using a candle test? This word right here, efficacy, basically means how effective something is. So we're testing how effective different masks are for blowing out candles. Okay? So could you come up with a hypothesis for the experiment that we're going to do? So really quickly, if you look at this picture here, we are going to test 4 different types of masks. Okay? Mask number 1 right here, we're going to test a surgical mask. You guys have seen those, people wearing those all over the place. So we're going to test a surgical mask. 2 here, we're going to test kind of your normal run-of-the-mill cloth or cotton or whatever mask. Pretty sure it's 2-ply, like they asked us to do, but this is a red KEA mask that the teachers got from the Education Association. Number 3, we're going to test a mask that came from the Fort Thomas Independent Schools. This is also kind of a cloth type mask, but the construction of it is a little bit different than the KEA mask. And then over here we have a gator mask. A lot of people really like to wear these gator masks, so we're going to test one of those. Okay? So what could we do? What kind of hypothesis could we come up with for these different masks? And I want you to think about it this way. When you're writing a hypothesis or when you're thinking about creating a hypothesis, you can say, I hypothesize that something will happen. Okay? So, Mrs. Becker, could you potentially give me a hypothesis? We'll help the kids out a little bit. Could you potentially give me a hypothesis that you create for mask number 1, which is the surgical mask?
I hypothesize that if I use the surgical mask, it will not blow out the candle.
Okay, so Mrs. Becker created a hypothesis for mask number 1, and she said, I hypothesize that if I use the surgical mask, it will not allow me to blow out the candle. So that could be a perfect example of a hypothesis that you would create before you run an experiment. Give you guys just a minute and a half. Let's do The end of the alphabet. Let's do M through Z. We got a big group of people here. M through Z. So everybody, M through Z. Throw out some of those hypotheses that you may make to test, right, the efficiency or the efficacy of masks with candles. Give you a minute or so. Oh, here we go.
Okay, so we got a hypothesis. I hypothesize that if I use the fabric mask from FTIS and blow the candle, it will not go out. I hypothesize that the Gator mask will blow out the candle. I hypothesize that the thicker the mask or more layers it has, the harder it will be to blow out the candle.
All right.
So good job, guys, on those responses.
Wonderful. Okay, so those are all perfect examples of hypotheses that we could create for this test when we're looking at different types of masks and whether or not we can blow out a candle using those masks. So what we're going to do now, all right, what we're going to do now is the next step of the scientific method, all right? So the next step of the scientific method, and when we think of ARHEAD, A-R-H-E, this is the E portion of ARHEAD, and that is we are going to develop and run an experiment to try to collect data under controlled conditions about our question. Okay, you guys, we came up with a question, you guys came up with your hypotheses, we talked about resources. So now I'm going to throw it over to Mr. Wen, and he's going to actually run an experiment that he developed to test the question that we did before. All right, so here we go. I'm going to throw it over to him.
Hi, everybody.
There's Mrs. Becker. You're good.
Alrighty, guys. So I have my different masks here. And
Hold
the
on.
reason why I'm doing the experiment.
Hold on one second.
It's good.
Is it still on?
It's good, yeah.
The reason why I'm doing the experiment is because I've done the experiment already. So we don't want to make sure that we're following safe school guidelines, and I'm the one conducting the actual experiment. So we have our candle here. Before I start, I want to make sure that this isn't a trick candle that Mr. Ewald or Ms. Becker has placed on me. So
We would never do that to you.
what should I do first?
I would say you're going to want to probably try to blow out that candle without a mask on.
Okay,
I
now,
agree.
if I were to blow out the candle, does that mean that it's good in stopping the spread, or it's not very good in stopping the spread?
Not very good for stopping the spread.
Okay, so we're going to see.
Oh, man.
Alrighty, so wearing a mask, and just wearing a mask alone, does stop the spread of the virus. So don't go unmasked. Now, our first one. Alrighty, guys, if you think that this mask is going to blow out the candle, or if you don't think it is, what I want you to do is just write a simple yes or no. Yes, it'll blow out the candle. No, it won't blow out the candle.
Our first answer was yes, followed quickly by a no.
And then we had another yes and another no, it won't. Oh man, the participation is incredible. I would say very heavy on the nose.
Okay, very heavy on the nose. All right, so let's give this a try. Okay, that was really, really close. Okay, so it did flicker a little bit, but I would say overall, surgical mask is good in stopping the spread of the coronavirus.
It's definitely better than no mask at all.
Definitely better. Now, I'm going to give 2 large puffs every single time for each one of these masks, unless it goes out the first time. Okay, so the next one, the next mask, number 2. Yes or no if you think it's going to blow out the candle.
Gotta know. No. Oh, we got one yes. Gotta know, no. Lots of no's. One not.
Lots of no's.
Resounding no.
Lots of no's.
Alrighty. So let's see if that's the case. Oh.
Wah, wah.
Okay, now, guys, what this tells you is that even though you're wearing a mask, not all masks are created equally. So you got to make sure to be careful about what type of masks you're wearing. Not only that, but following the social distance guideline. Even if you're wearing a mask, it may not be effective as you think it is in terms of standing really, really close to your friends. All right, mask number 3, the Fort Thomas mask. Yes or no?
And remember, this is still basically a cloth type mask. It has just been created in a different way. The construction of it is a little bit different, but it's still just a cloth type mask.
We've got a few yeses and a few nos. Mostly yeses coming in right now.
All right.
All righty. Fort Thomas. Let's go. That didn't even flicker.
What a result.
Thank you, Fort Thomas. These are awesome masks. Okay, and then the last one, the gator mask. Okay,
So-
guys, yes or no on the gator mask?
This type of mask seems to be pretty popular
Right?
with a lot of people, young people, students, middle-aged people, older people. A lot of people like to wear these gator type masks. So we thought it was important for Mr. Wen to test this one as well.
Absolutely.
And this one,
Oh!
this one happens to be cotton, so lots of the gator masks are the polyester, so maybe the blend makes a difference.
Well, I think 100% of the responses
Oh
so
my God,
far.
they are.
Oh, we had one no. That's okay. Pretty much all. You're gonna blow out that candle, Mr. Wen. They think you're gonna blow it out.
Okay, we're gonna see whether or not I'm gonna blow this candle out.
Oh,
Oh,
Whoa.
another wah wah.
I think I'm wearing the surgical mask or the Fort Thomas mask.
So again, guys, it's really important that you consider what type of mask you're wearing. Not all masks are created equal. And most importantly, we are professionals. Don't do this at home.
Do something. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to take my mask off now that I'm back up here. So Mr. Wendt created an experiment, and he ran that experiment to basically investigate or test the question that he asked and potentially a hypothesis that he came up with based on that question. Now, there are a couple of incredibly important things that we need to think about when we create or develop experiments and run experiments. And we call these things variables, okay? So a variable is a quantity that can have more than a single value. So these are things that potentially change during an experiment. Based on what you're looking at, based on what you're trying to do, these variables can potentially be different because a variable is something, a quantity that can have more than a single value. So let me give you an example really quickly. We'll move away from the masks for just a second with the coronavirus, and let's use fertilizers in plants as an example for talking about these variables. Okay? So we're going to look at that here in just a second. So here are some possible factors, some things that we can think about when we're going to investigate using fertilizers to look at the growth of plants. We can look at the type of plant, the amount of sunlight, the amount of water potentially, the temperature in the room or in the environment where the plant is, the type of soil, and of course the type of fertilizer. So we're going to use this example where we're looking at fertilizers and the growth of plants to help us better understand this idea of variables. My hope is that you've heard of these before in one of your science classes up to this point, but we're going to take a little bit of time to talk about them right now too. So let's dive right into it. So the first type of variable that we have is what we call a dependent variable. Okay? The dependent variable is always going to be the variable that we as experimenters measure or collect data on. Every single time, the dependent variable is going to be the variable that we as experimenters measure or collect data on. So let's look at this beautiful little chart here that shows an experiment testing fertilizers and plant growth. Okay? So over here we have plants, we have amount of water, we have the amount of sun, we have the different types of fertilizers, and over here we have the height after 2 weeks. 16 centimeters, 14 centimeters, 18 centimeters, and 10 centimeters. So this value, these values right here, this is what we as the experimenter are interested in. This helps to provide data that could potentially help us answer our question that we posed at the very beginning. So in this case, the dependent variable would be the variable that we measure or the data that we actually collect. In this case, it would be the height after 2 weeks. Okay? So that's one very important part of an experiment that we need to be aware of, the dependent variable. Okay. Now, the data that we collect, so this dependent variable can pretty much come in two forms. All right, so there's two different types of data that we can collect. We can collect something that we call qualitative data, or we can collect something that we call quantitative data. So when we're thinking about qualitative data, this is categorical data, right? For example, a color. Did something happen? A yes or no? So these are things that we would see in the course of an experiment that we could collect as qualitative or categorical data. Type of color, did something happen? Quantitative, this is continuous data, right? Numbers. For example, the height of something, the weight of something, the number of people in the room, the speed of something. Okay, a measure of volume. So any type of continuous data, that's going to fall into our quantitative data. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question really quickly to one of the teachers in the room. We're going to jump back to our coronavirus mask and candle test. Qualitative or quantitative, Mr. Wendt, what do you think that kind of data was?
I would have to say it's qualitative data because we didn't collect any numbers, and it was really just a yes or a no question.
I like it. One more question for you. With this example that we're looking at right now, with the fertilizers and the plant growth, this dependent variable that we collected, would you say that's qualitative or quantitative data?
That's definitely quantitative data. We have numbers there, and that those numbers have both preceding and numbers that follow.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, so as we run experiments, we're going to be able to collect different types of data, and it's going to fall into one of these two categories. Okay? So let's now look at another variable. We looked at the dependent variable, so now we're going to look at the independent variable. So the independent variable is the variable that we, or you, as the experimenter, changes to see how it will affect the dependent variable in an investigation or an experiment. So you, as the experimenter, you are changing the independent variable so that you can see how it influences or affects the dependent variable. So let's look at our example. Okay? Same chart, but now we're highlighting this column right here. So the fertilizer type, type A, type B, type C, and no fertilizer, that's going to be our independent variable because we, as the experimenter, are going to change that from plant to plant. Okay? Why are we going to change it? Because we want to see how it influences the height, which is our dependent variable. Okay? So you can see with fertilizer A, we had 16 centimeters of growth. With fertilizer B, we had 14 centimeters. With fertilizer C, we had 18 centimeters. And with no fertilizer at all, we had 10 centimeters of growth. Okay? So every single time that we do an experiment, that independent variable is going to be the variable that you or me or anybody as the experimenter changes, right? From trial to trial or from plant to plant. Okay? So let's look at another one. Constant. So another type of variable that we want to be aware of is something that we call a constant. So a constant is a factor that does not change when other variables change. Okay? So we're going to change the independent variable. The dependent variable is going to change as a result of that. But if we look at this side of the chart, okay, amount of sun, 6 hours per day, 6 hours per day, 6 hours per day, and 6 hours per day. We didn't change that. We kept it constant. Amount of water, 4 ounces, 4 ounces, 4 ounces, 4 ounces. That stayed constant. Okay? And we're going to use the same type of plant. Even though they're numbered, we're going to use the same type of plant. So we're going to keep that constant. Okay? So we as experimenters, we're going to change something to see its effect on, in this case, the growth of the plant. But we have to keep the rest of the experiment constant. Okay, and we call those constants. All right, our last type of variable here is what we call a control, or the control group. All right, so a control is the standard of comparison, and it does not receive the independent variable. So every single time that we do an experiment, we have to have a control. Why do we have a control? We have a control so that we have something that we can compare the other parts of our experiment to. Okay? So in this experiment with the fertilizer, down here, this doesn't get the independent variable. So we're using no fertilizer there, and we got 10 centimeters of growth. So what we can do by having that control is we can compare 10 centimeters to 18 centimeters. We can compare 10 centimeters to 14 centimeters. We can compare 10 centimeters to 16 centimeters, right? So we can compare that control to everything, all the other data that we collect to see if there was a difference, maybe how large that difference was, and use that data to help us start the process of trying to support our hypothesis or answer our question at the very beginning, okay? Dependent variable, independent variable, constant variables, and then a control. So those are 4 things that we absolutely need to be aware of when we're thinking about the experiment portion of the scientific method. So, got a couple questions for you. And I'll give you a second or two, a minute or two in between each one to answer. So question number 4, write this on your paper. What is the dependent variable in our coronavirus mask and candle experiment? Okay, so in other words, what did we measure in that experiment? Right? Well, we'll take about a minute or two. Go ahead and put that in your notes. Let's go if your last name is K through R. We'll do a big group. K through R. If your last name is K through R, go ahead and put what you think the dependent variable was in the live chat.
Alrighty, we're getting some responses. Whether or not I was able to blow out the mask. Whether or not the candle was blown out by the mask. The ability to blow out the candle. Alrighty, so keep them coming. Good job, guys.
I like it. Great job, guys. Yes, so the dependent variable in our experiment, thanks guys that put those in the live chat, whether or not Mr. Wen could blow out the candle while wearing the different masks. Okay, so it's a yes or no. It's a qualitative piece of data that we could collect. Okay, so I'm going to jump on to the next one, and we'll go from there. Question number 5. So we're going to jump on to a new question. What was the independent variable, or what is the independent variable in our experiment with the coronavirus masks and the candle? So in other words, what did we as the experimenter change in that investigation, in that experiment? All right, take a second or a couple minutes, put it in your notes. We did a big group before. Let's do S through Z. So if your last name is S through Z, go ahead and throw in what you think the independent variable was in our coronavirus mask experiment in the live chat. Minute or two.
Alrighty, so we're already getting some responses. We got the mask, the type of mask used, the mask, the different types of masks, mask, the type of mask. Good job, guys.
Yes, right? So thank you again for putting those in the live chat. Those of you that had, what did we do, S through Z, I think it was. Independent variable, the variable that we as the experimenters changed, is the type of mask. Mr. Wen wore 4 different types of masks while he was doing that experiment. So that would be our independent variable. Okay, let's push on. Control. Okay. So question number 6, what is the control, or what was the control in our experiment with the coronavirus masks? So in other words, which one did not have the independent variable? So what was the situation in that experiment where we didn't actually use the independent variable? Let's go to the beginning of the alphabet. Let's do a small group. Let's do A through E. Last names A through E. if you could throw out in the live chat what you think the control was for our coronavirus mask experiments. 1 to 2 minutes, just like we've been doing. Throw those in the live chat. Make sure you put them on your piece of paper, and we'll come back together. Okay, so we do have a little bit of a lag. Obviously, we're shooting this thing live over Wi-Fi, so sometimes it works really well, sometimes it doesn't. I'm going to go ahead and jump on to the next question. If Mr. Wen sees any responses, he'll go ahead and interrupt me, and we'll jump back and we'll share those. I guess before we can do that, Mrs. Becker, Mr. Wen, do you guys want to help the kids out? What do you think the control in our coronavirus mask experiment might have been?
Well, if it didn't receive the independent variable, and the independent variable was the mask, then that means that the control has to be without a mask.
Love it. All right. So when Mr. Wen stood there without a mask on and tried to blow out the candle, that would have been our control in the coronavirus mask experiment. Okay. Again, sorry about the lag, but keep those answers coming, and we'll try to get caught up as we go. So let's jump on to the next question. Constant or constants. Okay. What is or are the constants in this experiment with the coronavirus masks and the candle? So in other words, what did not change throughout the experiment? What stayed the same, or what did we try to keep the same each time we did it? Okay? Let's go with everybody for this one. So A through Z. If you want to throw something out in the chat, you can do that. If not, make sure that you write it down on your own paper, and we'll come back together again in a minute or two. Okay, so what do you think is a constant? Throw out a couple. What's a constant that we had in our coronavirus mask experiment?
So it'll cut out here in a second. We'll see if we can get it caught back up. Mr. Wen shares the candle. Okay. No, so no.
Alrighty, so we're seeing a lot of different examples here. The type of candle, the person blowing out the candle, Mr. Wen's shoes. You're absolutely right. I had the same shoes on. The distance from the candle. The amount of air blown.
Love it. Love it. Okay. Wonderful job. Thanks for putting those out in the live chat there. So think about the constants. Okay? We ultimately want to look at how the independent variable influences the dependent variable. So by keeping all of those other things constant, so by Mr. Wen wearing the same shoes each and every time that he did the experiment, right, holding the candle at the same distance, blowing with the same force, using the same candle and the same lighter in the same room, okay, we want to keep all the rest of that stuff constant so that we can be sure that it was the independent variable, the mask, that actually caused the difference. So that's why those are so incredibly important. Okay, so thanks again for sharing with that. Let's go ahead and roll on. Okay. So let's take a step back. We're back to R head. Okay. We just finished up the E, which is experiment, and now we're on to the A. So the A portion of R head is analyzing the data that we collected during the experiment. Okay? So an important part of every experiment includes recording observations and organizing the data into easy-to-read tables and graphs, charts, whatever it is that you're using to display that data. So the A portion, analyzing the data that we get from the experiment, that's what we're at right now. Okay? So let's look at question number 8. Question number 8. In your notes, okay, so on your piece of paper for question number 8, I want you to go ahead and create a chart that's going to allow you to display and analyze the data that you collected during the coronavirus mask experiment. On the left side of your chart, I want you to go ahead and put type of mask and 4 blanks. On the right side of your chart, the results of the candle test, and I want you to go ahead and put 4 blanks. So this is the chart that we're going to use to record and analyze our data for the experiment. So just a reminder, you could use numbers over here. You could say mask number 1, mask number 2, mask number 3, and mask number 4. Or you could say surgical mask, cloth mask, or red cloth mask, Fort Thomas mask, and gator mask. All right, so you can do this how you wish as long as you have each of those masks in a box. And then on the right side here, remember that we're using qualitative data for this experiment, so this is going to be your yes or no. Was the candle blown out while Mr. Wen was wearing that mask? Yes or no for each box. Again, minute or two. We're not going to do anything in the live chat with this one, but I do want to give you some time to jot that chart down in your notes. So 1 or 2 minutes, and then we'll come back to that. All right. Gave you a little bit of time to fill out that chart. Make sure you finish that up. Make sure that it's in your notes. We're going to go ahead and roll on to the next part here. Okay? So we just finished up analyzing our data, which is the A portion of R head. Okay? So the last thing that we have is drawing our conclusions. So the D portion of R head is drawing or making conclusions for our experiment. So based on the analysis of our data, we are going to decide whether or not our hypothesis was supported. So based on everything that we saw in the experiment, based on the data that we collected, can we support our original hypothesis? Okay? So for the hypothesis to be considered valid and widely accepted, the experiment must be repeatable. This is huge. When you do an experiment, and you collect data, and you analyze that data, and you share that with other people, the idea is that those other people, scientists, students, whoever, should be able to repeat your experiment and compare their findings to your findings. The more information we get from the global science community, the more we can understand what's going on with the question. So we want to do that over and over and over again. So the experiment has to be repeatable. Okay, that's big, and we'll talk a lot about that this year. So our last part is drawing our conclusions. Do we support our hypothesis, or do we not support our hypothesis? So here we go. Question number 9. So on your paper, go ahead and write an answer to this. Was your original hypothesis supported by the experiment and the data that we collected? Okay? So you're going to review each hypothesis. And you're basically going to say one of two things. Number one, no, my original hypothesis was or was not supported. So for the surgical mask, you will say, no, my original hypothesis was or was not supported because Mr. Wen was not able to blow out the candle. Or you'll say, yes, my original hypothesis is supported because Mr. Wen was not able to blow out the candle wearing the surgical mask. Okay, so take a second, minute or two, just like we've been doing, and I want to throw it out to everybody again, A through Z. If you could give us in the live chat your conclusion or one of your conclusions based on how you did it, go ahead and put that into the live chat. We'll try to share out some of those and then we'll wrap it on up. So a minute or two, jot the answer to question number 9 in your notes and then see if you can throw just a couple of them into the live chat and we'll go from there. 1 or 2 minutes. All right, guys, I realize that we're running a little bit low on time. Took just a little bit longer than we originally planned. So we're going to roll into this last part here. Just make sure that you answer that question number 9. Make sure that you have that in your notes, and then we'll go from there. So the last thing that we want to say to you is this. Okay, and this is kind of a wrap-up. Make sure, okay, that you turn in the questions by the end of your class period or whenever that due date is that your teacher sets by checking Schoology for instructions on how to submit it. Okay? My students are doing a discussion board. I'm pretty sure that Mr. Wen's students are submitting a picture, and Mrs. Becker's students are
Submitting a picture also, but they've got directions.
okay, submitting a picture as well. So we're all doing something a little bit different. So it's important that you go to Schoology and look at the instructions for today for the live lecture to tell you exactly what to do. All right, so that's one of your last things. Check Schoology to see whether or not there's any more work for today. Okay, and that is normally going to be, I know Mr. Wen and me, and I think Mrs. Becker, that's something that you're going to work on and submit at a later date. So make sure that you get into Schoology and you check that out to see if there's anything else for you to do. And then the last part is pay attention to what's going on with your time-bound events. That could be a whole class thing. That could be a small group thing. That could be an individual thing. So make sure that you pay attention to the communication that's coming from Mr. Wen, Mrs. Becker, and me. Make sure that you pay attention to that communication about that time-bound event.
And they'll find that in Schoology and probably on Teams.
And you'll find that in Schoology or potentially on Teams. Thanks, Mrs. Becker. All right. I want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for logging on. Thanks for going along with us on this little live lecture. Thanks for participating in the live chat.
They did great.
You guys have been absolute rock stars. Can't wait to get back in the building. Can't wait to actually see you guys face to face instead of through a camera and a cord that goes into my computer. So have an incredible day. Check Schoology. Reach out to your teachers if you have questions or if you're not sure what's going on. And we'll see you guys back on Friday. All right. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you then.
I guess maybe when it catches up, you can end it. My hands. Sorry.